Hello and welcome to another installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adokwu. Today we'll be taking a look at the history of the offside rule, its current form, the debate around how it should be reformed, and we'll discuss whether the rule itself should be scrapped. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Yfootball_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Hello, Etches. Happy Easter. How are you?
Yeah, happy Easter to you as well, mate. How am I? Well, Arsenal got folded in two like a deck chair yesterday.
More than two.
Yeah, more than two, probably about 10 pieces by Liverpool yesterday, which wasn't very good. I've got two Liverpool friends in this group chat that love piping up. Basically, they're both glory hunters. I went to school with them. One of them was a known Liverpool fan. The other one, no idea. Suddenly went to uni. All of a sudden, he's wearing
Oh my
you know
God.
the old Liverpool candy kits from the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, he basically started donning all of those and giving it the chat. So yesterday I was under a bit of fire, but you know, it is what it is. They're better than us. They played. We were really really bad. So
Mm.
fair play to them. I know one of them's got Liverpool bed sheets still. So hopefully,
I sense a lot of
yeah.
resentment in your voice, in your
Yeah,
tone.
there's a lot of resentment in my voice. So hopefully he slept. Hopefully he slept well in those bed sheets as well. And the other one's got a calendar of Michael Owen in his bedroom wall. So hopefully he enjoyed
I,
ticking off that on the calendar yesterday.
I bet they slept like absolute babies at Chess, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
It's
probably
just
did.
mad how Diego Jota comes back in the team and suddenly they start firing because they were so potent with him before. I thought that was interesting, but yeah, another kind of mark against the name of Arsenal Football Club in recent history, but we just won't go any further into
No, indeed.
because we might
How
have,
you
we
doing?
might have some tears. Yeah, I'm not too bad. Didn't catch much football this weekend. Went to Hell Velen yesterday, which is it's in the Lake District, and it's basically like a climb slash hike. So that's basically what I'm doing these days, getting a bit older.
Nice.
It's a sign you're getting older when you start climbing mountains. But yeah, no, that's good. But yeah, I haven't caught much football, which is a shame. But Sunderland are playing tomorrow. We play Friday and Monday over the Easter period. So if you're in Championship, League One, League Two, you play the Friday and the Monday, which is a bit mad. But I
Mm.
think particularly this season, because the season started later, and even in the lower leagues, you still play loads of games. Like we don't participate obviously in Europe, but you play in the FA Cup and the League Cup, where you are likely to get knocked out quicker. But then you also have the Pizza Cup, which we won. So and
Oh,
it's a
did you?
46 and it's a 40 yeah, we won the Pizza Cup. And
Oh, I
it's a
didn't know
40
that.
oh, thanks for the thanks for listening. But yeah, it means you are actually playing a lot of games. It's a 46 league season, so I mean, you can end up playing like over 50 games, and the season started later because a lot of clubs in the football league were hit with COVID quite badly. So Sunderland lost like 4 games over Christmas, so they're just hammering games in between now and May, and so we're just playing all the time. So, just moving on to today's topic, the offside law. How did it all begin?
Yeah, first of all, I kind of wanted to do this topic not because I decided to open up and examine all of the rules within football, but it's mostly been because in the news lately, we've been seeing Arsene Wenger discuss the offside rule a lot in terms of some proposals, which we'll discuss later on, but also it's been a huge issue this season. There are
Mm.
loads of people who are all wrong, by the way, crying, saying VAR should be scrapped because like it's ruining the game and like attackers, it doesn't benefit attackers. And how can he be 0.02 meters offside? How can this happen? It's ruining the game, blah, blah, blah. So I thought to look into the actual offside law and kind of how it all came about and what it's going to look like in the future would be a really interesting topic to look into because
Mm.
I don't particularly love it when you're seeing them draw those lines on the VAR. I think it's the way forward because, I'll get onto it a bit later on.
Yeah.
But I know for many people, particularly some of the older generation down at the local, when they see those lines drawn out, you see the veins start popping in their foreheads and they're fuming, frothing at the mouth. So
Yeah, true.
yeah, we'll go into that a little bit later on. But the history of offside law is quite funny, actually. So in 1883, when the Football Association first drafted its laws of the game, it stated that no forward passes were allowed unless the ball was hit from behind the goal line. A football player was offside unless three players of the opposing team were in front of him, including the goalkeeper. Three. That's actually so many people. Yeah, so that was the first rule.
So when you say it has to be behind the line, so is that how goal kicks were taken at that time? So it was only basically a goal kick where you can be past 3 players. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I haven't specifically examined the fine detail of the rules in 1883, but that's the perception I got from reading it. It just sounds like a nightmare. I mean, the game was played really differently back then, right? It's not as if you were having like
Yeah.
Pep Guardiola's 2008 Barcelona masterclass playing back then, but it is very interesting to see how the game's evolved over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like an absolute nightmare to officiate, knowing where where a player is compared to 3 defenders, and also then like how just a wonder that any goals were scored at all.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's a pretty mad rule indeed. It moved on further in 1925, where the rule changed to 2 opponents instead of 3, which increased the number of goals scored. Before this
Mm.
rule, passing was mostly done away from their opponent's goal. But when the offside rule was changed in 1925, passing became an integral part of football. Don't read that or don't listen to that bit, Sam Allardyce. Basten's reading. Don't think he wants to be reading that. And to many, the beauty of modern football was born. The amount of goals increased even further, aided by a rule change in 1912 preventing goalkeepers from handling the ball outside of the penalty area. Another rule in 1920 banned offsides from throw-ins. So that's
Mm.
lasted for a really long time. I didn't know it was such an old rule. And also, imagine
Yeah.
in 1912, goalkeepers, or before 1912, goalkeepers could handle the ball outside the penalty area. That's mad.
Well, so they could actually catch the ball. That's what I don't understand. So they can
Yeah, I think so. Can you imagine?
we just run to the goal. It's like lacrosse or like
I mean,
it's
you
mad.
laugh, but everything is with a pinch of salt, right? Because it's very hard to think of football back then. Most of the people watching football around our age back then are dead or very, very old now. So it's just very weird to think of football like that. Um,
Yeah. And
just the keeper running around catching the ball like it's no man's business.
yeah, you would have
It's
had
interesting.
standards as well and like etiquette, I suppose, that would kind of keep the game perhaps it was less gamesmanship and to keep the game more kind of within a reasonable standard. Because obviously,
Yeah.
if that was still a rule today, you just have Allison or Edison. I called him Ellison there. Just catching the ball, running up the field, and just launching it past Jordan Pickford from point blank
Yeah,
range.
it is a bit mad, and I assume that might have been a tactic. I don't really know, to be honest. Like, yeah, just catching the ball and running about. Yeah, I'm not too sure how that'd work in modern football. Moving on, in 1990, another amendment to the offside rule was made. Now, a player was onside if they were level with the last opponent that he faced. This was a result of the lack of exciting play at the World Cup in Italy in 90, and they tried to give more of an impetus for attacking teams, so they changed the
Mm,
rules. 95, another change happened in the rules, which was a player was only deemed to be active if he was gaining an advantage from being in that position. These two alterations were used in an attempt to, again, make the game more attractive.
yep.
15 years later, there was another update. From now on, a player was only offside if he or she touched the ball or was in a position to make physical contact with an opponent. And then finally, in 2005, it was amended in its wording. So this slight tweak was clarified about what it meant to be interfering with play.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what it cleared up then. So from then on, there'd be no instances of a player collecting a pass and then a flag going up because his teammate had wandered in an offside position elsewhere, not really doing anything,
Yeah.
which was really, really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. For some reason, listen to this. The player in my mind who used to be in that position quite often or would be offside whilst he's nowhere near the ball and ruin it for his team is Emil Heskey. I don't know if I'm just remembering a specific incident, but for some reason his face and his like figure like picks out. But I mean, the rule change around like interfering with play has been used quite effectively. If you think about like almost the classic Guardiola Man City goal, when they try like basically trying to get it through the play that pass between the centre half and the fullback to go for an overlapping winger or overlapping wing back, such as Carl Walker, then play that ball across to the forward, then taps it in. That forward likely for a lot of that move is standing offside because it gives them that advantage to get in that position early. And then as soon as the ball gets played forward, the defenders naturally drop. They then become onside and can then kind of move from that position if required, but have already got the advantage of being there first, and then they just get in the back and slot it in. So it has that is quite a significant rule change, but it makes sense though, because you're stopping the game for for players. If he's trying to bend the rules, it's one thing, but if they're just in an offside position on the complete other side of the pitch, then it just makes it doesn't actually affect the game or affect the move.
No, it makes absolutely no sense, mate. Which is kind of why these things have come into place. The actual current rule itself, because you know what? When I was doing this pod, I thought I know what the offside rule is, but I was like, do I? Like
Yeah,
you know the general gist of it, but there's so many tweaks now. So, for example, when we first had VAR, we originally said that if any of your body part was offside, that was offside. But then we've actually
yeah,
tweaked that rule so it's any part you can score a goal with. I actually wasn't that clear on when that switch had happened. I think it must have been within the last year. So I thought, let me actually read up on it and make sure that I know what it
yeah.
is. So a player is in an offside position if any part of his head, body, or feet is in the opponent's half, excluding the halfway line, and any part of the head, body, or feet is nearer to the opponent's goal line than both the ball and the second last opponent. The
Mm.
hands and arms of all players, including the goalkeepers, are not considered. A player is not in an offside position if he is level with the second to last opponent or the last two opponents. I mean, the big one is obviously that hands and arms thing, because that's a recent tweak to the rule, which wasn't too long ago. So that's for anyone that doesn't know, if you're new to football, if you love American football or something else, that's the rule for you. Just write that one down, put it on a post-it. I think would be quite useful.
Yeah, it's as you said before, like there's so many nuances to a lot of rules. Like what I mentioned about the the throw-in rule before. Like you don't really consider these things until they actually happen.
Yeah.
So even think about yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, but in the Man City game, Fernandinho had a great strike from probably about 25 yards straight to the bottom corner that was disallowed because Aguero was standing in an offside position, and the ball basically. I mean, it was quite minor, but the ball did. He did get in the path between, or the line of sight between the goalkeeper Kasper Schmeichel and Fernandinho, and so he did. He would have affected it. I don't know whether or not it was enough. It was a really good strike, and it's a good chance that was going in anyway. It's right in the bottom corner. It was given offside. I do think, based on the current rule, that was correct decision. But it just shows that when certain things happen like that, which has happened before, but you test certain parts of the rule, and that's why they have to make these tweaks to kind of bring them in line and make them consistent.
Quick question about Aguero: does he still have those blonde highlights?
I can't remember. I think he does. I only watched the highlights last night on Match of the Day 2. Why is Match of the Day 2? I know it was Match of the Day 1. Sorry, I keep thinking it's. I think it's a bank holiday. I keep thinking it's like Sunday. But why is Match of the Day 2 on so late on a Sunday? But that's a first point. But yeah, I only watched the highlights yesterday, and I think he does. I'm not too sure actually. He's the only one of the only players I think suits the peroxide blonde look. I don't
No,
know why I think
no,
that.
no, he doesn't, mate.
Why not?
He just doesn't, mate. I don't need to go
Fair
into
enough.
it because it's basically a whole pod in its own. Like, if you're a baller and you have peroxide blonde hair, Sam Nasri especially, you don't look good. Sam Nasri, Benjamin Mendy, Mbappe, Neymar, no, none of them look good. Keylor Navas, Icardi, quite a lot of PSG players. Now that I'm saying it, but yeah, none of them look good. Kimpembe, I've seen Kimpembe do it as well. No, he's not looking good. Wesley Fofana, I've seen Wesley Fofana. No, big red X. None of you look good. I know you got loads of money. You can do whatever you want. Cool, fair enough. But that is not the look you should go for.
Yeah, you've got it. The actual purist of the game in that look, and it's natural, is Sami Hyypiä. He would be, he'd be
I was
fuming seeing
thinking
this.
about Sammy Hippier. Yeah, fair enough. You're not wrong, mate. You're not wrong. Good old Sammy Hippier.
No, I think I've just googled it now, and I think he's just got dark hair now. But I'm sure we'll all rest easier knowing this fact.
Thanks for sharing, mate. And thank you to Sammy Hippier for being the leading figure. So moving on with the offside law, we kind of enter the era of VAR, which is basically when it becomes a problem. Because, generally footballers always given some leniency towards offside calls because the margins are so fine, making it hard for officials to judge. There's always the accepted notion that a small degree of human error is allowed. And what's weird about football is only with offsides. So, like, for example, if I go and break someone's leg in a horrible tackle and the ref doesn't give a red card, you know, that's not a small degree of human error being allowed. That should just be a red card. Same with
Yeah,
handballs. Same with goal line. Goals that cross the line. I remember Luis Garcia against Chelsea way
yeah,
back when in 2005 or 2004. Can't remember the year. And there was that thing: did it cross the line? Did it not? And people still go on about it now. But offsides have always had this level of leniency, probably because of how tight the calls are and how
yeah,
how small the margin is. That's always kind of been given. Sometimes a player's like half a foot offside, but no one really says anything because
mm,
the linesman's not going to see that. Obviously, if he's a whole half a body, then you're like, come on, linesman. But generally speaking, it's let go. But because of VAR, everyone's like puffed their chests out, being like, yeah, we fixed football because we've got technology to help us see these errors. But what it's done is it's caused more problems because I spoke before about some of the older generation down at the pub, not just older generation as well, people
yeah,
our age as well. Their blood's boiling when they're seeing those lines pulled out to see how far a player's on or offside. And when the margin is 0.8 centimeters, which by law is correct,
yeah.
many are screaming like it's ruining the game, the advantage is being taken away from the attacker. This is not what football's meant to be. Bring back pure football and all this sort of nonsense. Is
Yeah,
basically what's brought the offside law back into focus.
yeah, I think you've got those general kind of VAR haters that just want to find any excuse to get the game back to where it was and just find any excuse to smite VAR. But then you've got people. I mean, I'm in favor of VAR, but I don't. I think you probably agree as well. I don't like the current offside checking because it's not consistent. So every time you've got someone somewhere drawing line on, well, it's not drawing a line, but they're having to move. So these kind of automated lines come into play, and so it's not consistent. So I mean, you feel as if each call it could be a different outcome, and then obviously also it's just the time thing as well. Like it just takes ages, and that's my biggest
Mm.
with some of the rule changes that have came in recently. If you think about VAR, and then you think about like the five sub rule, right? If you think if you have a couple of VAR decisions and both teams use all five of their subs, the game goes on for like 105 minutes, man. You can't. The
Yeah, true.
schedules are already really tight. I mean, you can't. The game can't be going on that long unless you actually shorten it down to take into account these delays. The game's going to go on forever.
You know it
Really.
needs it needs to happen really in football, which is an unpopular opinion. Just stop the clock, man. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why people are like, oh god, it's only 5 minutes of injury time. What the hell? Just stop the clock.
Yeah, I think that as well. Yeah.
Why in 2021 are we just letting the clock run? Are you mad? Just stop the clock. Then you've got someone
Yeah.
screaming, normally me to be fair, when it's 1-1 and we're like drawing to like Cheltenham. Oh, like why is it only 6 minutes added on? And it's because just stop the clock. I just had to get it out there because it's just I don't get it. Like the ref comes under so much pressure. Just stop the clock. But football's a really old game. It's one of those things.
Yeah,
Uh,
I read some calls that was quite a long time ago. Actually, maybe a couple of seasons ago, where there was like a suggestion that it should be shortened. The game should be shortened to 60 minutes, but you stop the clock because there was a study done that on average, I think there's something like 60 minutes. The ball is in play anyway, so you've already got
mm,
that 30 minutes around it where the ball isn't in play. People are getting set up for set pieces and corners. It might be more than 60, but even so, it's not going to be anywhere near the 90. So do we just stop the clock and then I mean, there's loads of things around it, like could gamesmanship come into it and all that sort of stuff. But in theory, I mean, it works in other sports. So
mm.
why can't it work in football? I suppose.
Yeah, it's a separate topic in its own about how archaic football is with its like it's just the way it's run. Like, we've had Hawkeye and cricket for years, and football all of a sudden have decided, yeah, we should try this VAR stuff. And it's like, it's long overdue. But that's a topic for another day. Talking about the offside rule. So I looked at interviews about people talking about it, and one was from Marco van Basten, who I'm sure
Mm.
everyone knows, who was saying that the offside rule should be scrapped altogether. That's why I put this bit in here, because when you just read something outrageous and you're like, hang on. So he said he is basically saying that he doesn't think the offside rule is very good. He would like to trial it to show that football can be played without it. So Van Basten himself was a technical director at FIFA from 2016 to 2018. He believes VARs are ruining the game due to how it's being deployed, which I think there's an argument there in terms of timing and stuff. He added that he reckons teams would learn how to play without it. Detractors would say, if there's no offside, then there'd be no space for attackers because defenders would sit, by the goalkeeper. But Van Basten was basically saying that the gap between midfield and defense would become so large that the game would change. So think about it this way: if imagine your back four are by your, surrounding your keeper,
Yeah,
then you've got your four midfielders and your two attackers. If the opposing team get past the midfield, you're just going to have like six men running at four people. And he's basically saying how, teams would kind of change because you don't want that. You don't really want like six runners coming at you from a very long way away at different angles and different speeds where you have to
yeah,
break out. So it was quite an interesting point. He was saying that if the defenders drop too deep, the keeper wouldn't be able to see, so he'd want them to push up. And it was an interesting point. I think the reason why I put it in is sometimes football is very set in its ways. We can't think of truly innovative ways to think of the game. I don't think this is actually a very useful point, but it raises the question of football really trying to break free from issues it has in the past. So the clock one you just mentioned, the offside rule being another one, handballs another one, which is a
yeah.
massive grey area. So that's kind of why I put it in. He also said it's been abolished in hockey, field hockey. That used to have the offside rule, and now it doesn't, and it's thrived since. I then had some information about the offside rule in hockey, and then I realized I don't know anything about the sport. So I
Yeah,
took it
I,
straight out.
I've absolutely no idea.
So yeah, that's kind of Van Basten's view on it all.
Yeah, I've actually read that quote before, and I'm a bit torn on it because I mean, there's so much you have to consider. I mean, so much the way we play football is built around the offside rule
Yep.
because it's such a massive factor. I mean, you could argue that the rule currently restricts space. So you think about even just think about like a club team lined up now. Say they have the defenders all. I mean, the wing backs will probably be in the opposition box, but their centre halves at the very least will be like almost within the halfway line. So if you then think about the opposition getting the ball back, it, unless they can break that offside trap with a well-timed pass, which is part of tactics, and the striker gets or the attacker gets a run on the defenders, in theory they can't actually occupy that space behind the defenders at all, unless they do what I just said. So, in theory, it tightens up the pitch, and that's obviously part of tactics, isn't it? You tighten the space up so you can then
Yep.
apply like a pressing move and you can win the ball back, and that's part of tactics. So I think tactics would just have to change altogether. I mean, how do you play a high pressing move when
Mm.
there's no? I mean, you could still press the opposition defense, but then you would then just leave so much space in behind that the other team could just stick three attackers. It's like when you played on the park when you were a kid and you have people goal lounging. That is essentially what you'd be doing there. And yeah, I do think defenders would just drop deeper, but that would create more space across the pitch. So you'd have more time with the
Yeah.
ball, more attempts to be able to run at defenders. There wouldn't be this kind of squeezing in certain areas of play. Um, I do think it possibly make it more difficult to park the bus as well. Like if you think about England in their recent games, I mean, against San Marino is an extreme example, but they can just park the bus on the edge of the box. The opposition defense attackers can't go beyond that. So you've got to find a way of breaking that wall, getting through and behind.
Mm.
And I think it would be made easier the fact if you could just have players, surrounding the keeper, surrounding the box. But I just think like it would make it so cagey. Like, and it would just mean that, it would just be, I just think you'd see loads of goalmouth scrambles because everyone would be in the box. And so like there'd be no space in behind. So currently once you break the offside trap, that is a way in which a lot of goals are scored is by breaking that trap. But once
Yeah.
you do it, the attacker has space to then get a shot away, test the keeper to go 1-on-1, which I think we're seeing less of. But without that, you're just going to have such deep defenses that it's just going to be scrambles in the box. You're not going to see perhaps the beautiful sight of like an Henri going through her own goal rounding the keeper. You're not going to see that anymore. So I do wonder if that is actually beneficial, to be honest.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that's where the visionaries of games are born, where they see these changes and then think of ways to kind of combat it. But, I doubt that'll ever happen. But it was interesting to
Mm.
kind of read. Another one was current head of football development, Arsene Wenger, hashtag legend. He had other
Nice.
ideas for the offside rule. He is proposing that as long as any body part of a player that can use to score a goal is onside and the player is onside. So this basically means that a player can be like nearly a yard offside if they're in a sprinting motion, but let's say their standing leg is in line with the defender or their standing foot is in line with the defender, then they're
Yeah.
onside, which gives impetus back to the attacking team and gives them an advantage, which has been eradicated with VAR. That is now currently being trialed in an unnamed Chinese league. I don't know why it's unnamed. Maybe so people don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
what? If you're saying you're trialing it, like, why can't people know what league it's in? But anyway, unnamed Chinese league, they're doing that now. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting actually. Because I mean, I don't think it would get rid of the the issue of like, is it zero point 0.8 centimeters or whatever?
Yeah,
Because it's still gonna have that factor. But
yeah.
what allows an attacker to do is get more of a running start on the defender. So you can, in theory, you can already be ahead of the defender when you go through, as long as your trailing leg is onside. Or I don't know how you would do that. You just leave your you just leave your foot in as you were going forward. But yeah, I think that's quite an interesting proposition. But I don't think it's not going to fix the current VAR issues, I think.
No, no, I completely agree. There's also a development of a semi-automatic tracking system to pick up offsides, which is being trialed. So it was actually used
Mm.
offline at the 2019 World Cup. The technology being looked at is an offside system that combines limb tracking with artificial intelligence. So basically, what it is optimal tracking uses 1 point per player. But it's using this limb tracking, which follows 15 to 20 points on a player. This makes loads of sense when you can see diagrams and charts. When you can't, it just sounds like absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
So I'm noticing people are probably dropping off, like literally stopping the pod and thinking, I've had enough of this. But it is really interesting. It's basically based off these data points, algorithms can work out which point of the limb is close to the goal at any given moment. And this can then be used to create the offside lines. This data is used to then create a semi-automated offside system. So the moment the ball is played across at any point, this offside line automatically positions it based off the players that are involved. This differs from the current VAR technology we have now, where it's painstakingly slow, man. Where you see the guy with his little line and he
Uh,
moves the line up, and you see him pick the frame. Then 2.5 minutes later, he's still drawing these little blue lines down. So obviously, what it will do, it will really speed up the VAR process, which is a different argument, right? We're talking mostly about the issue with the law itself and how it can be tweaked, but there's also an element as well about regardless of the law, regardless of whether you hate or love VAR, it's just too long. It needs to be quicker.
yeah,
I think what we'll see eventually is Wenger's potential tweak may work. You raised the argument about how you still have the problem about whether it's 0.8 centimeters on or offside. That just comes down to whether you dislike VAR or not, because I think one is offside, one isn't. We accepted it before because of leniency, and we have to accept in a realm now where that's just how it is. For example, Hawkeye isn't 100% accurate. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's not 100% accurate. It's like, let's say 95%. You don't get
yeah,
people then tweeting like, well, how do we know that it would have missed off stump by 0.0? Have you seen how tight some of those Hawkeye calls are? They're
yeah,
so narrow. But we accept it because that's what it's like when you accept technology in a system, right? You have to work with it. You can't then just go and say, oh, he's 0.04 centimeters offside, therefore the game's ruined. There has to be
yeah.
a
No,
rule, either
agreed.
it is or isn't offside. What do you then say? Because it's less than a centimeter, it's allowed. Well, where does it end? Does it end at 10 centimeters? Does it end at 30? If it's Harry Kane, is he always onside? Like, there has to be some sort of rule in place. So I kind of think that it's one of those ones where the tweak may happen with Wenger and it gives advantages back to the attacker. But those that are still moaning about, whether any part is onside or offside have to accept that technology is here to, analyze what information we have based off the rule. We just have to accept it for what it is.
Yeah, and the Hawkeye example is a great example because, well, I think one of the reasons I think it works so well is because, I mean, cricket does lend itself a bit more naturally to the kind of the stops, the delays, but it's just consistent though. Like you see the same thing every time. It's a
True.
consistent
That's
kind
true.
of presentation, and it provides more certainty than a human does. I mean, even like 95% accuracy would be higher than a human. Even though I think anyway, and before VAR, and I don't think we should scrap VAR because I think it's innovative and we'll get there eventually, hopefully. But I did think officials did a good job before. I just think people were getting pedantic and therefore expecting us to have a perfect game, which we'll never have. Um, and so I just think changing the laws of the game, like we talked about the Van Basten from Court, which is I know it wasn't kind of a means of fixing VAR, it's just a general point about how he thinks the game could be better. But I mean, there's a reason why football is the most popular sport in the world now. I don't think we need to overhaul the rules every year. That IFAB have to get together like they do and think of different ways in which we could make it more fun. Like introducing 6 different balls on the pitch at every time. It's not gonna. I don't think it needs to be tweaked. Um, but I do think that as long as we make the presentation, we don't have these lines being drawn. Instead, we see this like if it's automated and it takes away the subjectivity of it, then you have that consistency, and then you can have this same presentation like you do in Hawkeye, where the balls flying down the crease, and it's hitting the stumps. That you have that consistency every time, so then fans become comfortable. But when you're watching your team and you start to see this guy or this lady somewhere, you don't even know where they are. They're drawing lines on the screen, and it's taken 3-4 minutes longer than it did on the previous decision in the previous game. Then you just start to question it, and you start to think, well, this is not right, and then that just fuels this like uncertainty that is not helpful and completely defeats the purpose of VAR in the first place.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
in an ideal world, VAR needs to be almost instant, and it's not. There will be teething problems. I didn't expect it to be so many, and we will probably do a pod on VAR in itself because there are loads of aspects we haven't spoken about. The handballs and the red cards, and when they don't review stuff and do review stuff. But in terms of the offside rule in particular, yeah, consistency is an issue which can be applied across board. Hopefully, with the tweaks in technology and maybe with the increased cameras, and as time goes on, it gets better and better. But for those people that are really anti-VAR, I think VAR needs to do better to get them on side.
Yeah, I think people need more VAR-based content in their life. I think that's definitely a good idea.
Yeah, I think they do. I think the people are asking for round two. So maybe next week, maybe the week after, we'll do another bit on VAR and the history of VAR itself. And that'd be a good one. 2-hour special, I reckon. 2-hour special for
Yeah,
that
2-hour
one.
special. Brilliant. Looking forward to it. All right, then. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Etches, thank you so much for the insight on the history of the offside rule, its current rule, and the absolute monster debate that is VAR and the offside rule within it. So, yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Easter weekend, Etches. And yeah, we'll thank you all for listening as well. And we'll see you next time.
Cheers, guys.